Weeks after Iran, Iraq, Syria and Russia declared an end to Daesh terrorists, the US Defense Secretary surprised by saying that America's war was not over in Iraq and Syria. Jim Mattis has been quoted by media as saying that much work still needed to be done to prevent the resurgence of the terrorists. And that is seen as an indication which shows Washington is already preparing for a stronger military presence in Syria. But that, of course, is against the international law, particularly given that no party has invited America to help Syria with its war on terrorists.
We have to remember that there is zero justification for the presence of the US in Syria according to international law. No one in the Syrian government has invited the US in, and the United Nations has never given the US anything even close to a mandate for their presence in Syria. So this illegal presence is very dangerous, and the arrogance of the American regime when you have people like Mattis talking about Syria as though they're moving tanks around from one part of the United States to another. Syria is a sovereign country. Not a single American tank has the right to be there. Not a single American soldier. Not a single uninvited American civilian. Not a single American jet over the territory of Syria. And this goes for America's stoogy allies in Europe and in the Persian Gulf as well.
The remarks by the US defense chief fit the context of America's policy of interference in the affairs of other countries. History is full of instances in which the Americas have interfered in the affairs of other countries in one way or another to implement their own desired political outcomes. And Syria will of course not be the last victim of the plots designed by US leaders, plots that are meant to satisfy goals which simply go beyond the targeted states.
The US wants the aggression to continue. They just don't want to leave countries alone. They refuse to leave Iraq alone. They don't want to leave Syria alone, and they want their proxies to continue to meddle in countries throughout not just the Middle East, but the world. We see it in East Asia, Korean Peninsula. We see it with what they've done over the last 20 years in the Caucasus. We see it with what they are doing on Russia's western frontier. We see it in the meddling in many parts of Africa. Indeed, the president of Sudan has regretted having a partnership with the US, and now he said he wants to focus more on countries like Russia, like China, and even like Turkey. So the US is a toxin in the wider world because it's uninvited. Countries that are uninvited will always cause problems, but the US has, of course, mastered this art more than most. It's a very serious matter, and all of Syria's friends must work to correct it.
The war on the terrorists in Syria was recently marked by a series of significant gains by the government and its allies. But it appears that certain parties, including the US, do not want the war to end. What testifies to this are speculations that emerged after Mattis' assertion that the war is still not over for US troops, not only in Syria, but also in Iraq.
And the US has lost this war. Their Takfiris and their Kurdish terrorists have lost. And even though the war isn't over yet, the victory of Syria and her allies is assured. The question which remains is, what will the victory look like? What will the peace look like after that? But the Americans want to disrupt the peace as much as possible to make it as unpeaceful as possible. They want to continue an illegal occupational force in Syria so as to disrupt Syria's legitimate goal of unifying her territory once again, as it was prior to the US instigated war on Syria through their proxy Takfiri savage armies.
It appears that Syria will continue to remain a key battleground between regional as well as extra-regional forces. What now appears to have already become an endless war has no clear winner. What is clear, though, that the death and destruction in Syria will only get worse to the misfortune of millions of civilians living in the country.